Welcome to Sticky, Stories That Stick. Join me, Amelia Forzak, as I sit down with master storytellers to explore what makes some narratives unforgettable. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Amelia Forzak, the host of Sticky, Stories That Stick, where I sit down with successful executives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders to uncover the pivotal moments that shape them and explore what transforms personal experiences into stories that truly stick with audiences. Whether you're crafting your next keynote, writing a book, or simply want to connect more authentically with others, you'll discover the psychology behind memorable storytelling and learn how to turn your own life experiences into narratives that resonate and inspire action. Today, I have a very exciting guest with me, but first, I just have to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Pithy Wordsmithery, a Chicago-based boutique firm founded by yours truly, Amelia Forzak. I'm a New York Times bestselling ghostwriter, and I love helping people write and publish their books. Since 2011, my team and I have helped many authors turn their stories into bestsellers and their brands into thought leadership platforms. Our readership is in the hundreds of thousands, so even if you haven't heard of us, there's a decent chance you've read something we've written. If you've ever thought about writing a book, check us out online at pithywordsmithery.com. Today, I have Darren Pleasance with me. Darren has lived an incredible life. He's worked for some of the most influential companies in the world. He's flown private jets for celebrities. He's landed planes on glaciers in Alaska. And he and his wife, Lisa, run a beautiful horse farm in Central Oregon. Today, Darren is the CEO of the AOPA, the world's largest aviation membership organization. And he's the proud author of his 2024 book, True North, a handbook for inspired living, which I have right here. So, Darren, thank you so much for joining us.
Amelia, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
So, you've had such an interesting life. When I was thinking about this podcast and storytelling and just our experience going through the book, you have a ton of stories. And so I thought you'd be a great guest.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've lived a very interesting life and happy to share stories from that.
Yeah, so it's almost like you've lived a lot of lives in one because you've had some interesting career transitions. And so you've done the corporate thing in a really cool way, like working at Nike and Google and other cool organizations. And you've also been a pilot professionally. So tell me about that journey.
Yeah, it really, for me, the golden thread was aviation. I discovered at a very young age that I liked airplanes, even though I came from a family that didn't have anything to do with general aviation. I discovered it mostly through model airplanes. I lived close enough to an airport at the town I grew up in Livermore, California, that allowed me to go out and just start getting proximity to airplanes. So that was really the kernel. And then from there became the first chapter of many chapters in my life. That first chapter was really getting my pilot's license to becoming a flight instructor and teaching people to fly. There was a second chapter where I was flying cool, interesting types of airplanes, including, like you said, flying celebrities. I went up to Alaska, became a bush pilot. I flew corporate jets all over the country and into the Caribbean. And so that was my next chapter. That then led to my business chapter, which had me at a place called McKinsey and Company, and then Google, and then Cisco, and then now AOPA. And all the way through, each of those chapters was somewhere between 6 and call it 14 years long. And each one built on the prior chapter, but each one was distinct in its own right. So to your point, it's been a lot of lives in one. And I'm happy with that. It's actually been really fun to keep that diversity and entertainment going in my life and just keep me fired up and fueled up to take on whatever that next chapter is.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember from your book, just talking about how passion matters so much in life. And a lot of times people sort of just keep coasting. They find something that works and they just keep doing it. And they wake up like 30 years later and they're still doing that thing. And they never got a chance to do all these other things that they were sort of interested in and didn't get to cultivate. Tell me about that, because I know that's one of your big teaching points when you talk to audiences.
It is, yeah. And again, I didn't know what was going to light me up. And so I give a ton of credit to my parents because they were willing to allow me to discover that and help me to discover it. But as I discovered it, it turned out the thing that got me excited was not something that they themselves were particularly excited about, this world of aviation. They didn't know much about it. But I give them a lot of credit that they saw in me a level of energy that was driving me forward. And I was picking up those magazines to read, and I was riding my bike 5 miles out to the airport under my own energy to go make these things happen. And and this isn't the benefit of hindsight, but boy, if you're lucky enough to find something that lights you up, that gets you going, that has that passion, and you can do so much with that energy, because those who find something they love doing are likely to differentiate themselves relative to others and be better at those things than others. And you get this virtual cycle where you find something you like doing, you tend to do it more than the average person. If you do it more than the average person, you get better than the average person. And if you get better at the average person at pretty much anything, you can find a way to make that a big part of your life. And so it does start with, though, you have to find something that really lights you up and gets you going. And again, for me, that was aviation, but it could be music, it could be writing books, it could be sports, it could be math, science, it could be anything. So it's really about what is it for you that lights that fire and gets you moving.
Mm-hmm. I am so excited for you with this current job too, because I feel like the your passion and then the like corporate thing finally came together.
It did. Yeah. I mean, this kind of funny life has worked out this way. Maybe we'll get into that as part of the podcast, but there is something about, luck is really, as they say out there, right? Luck is when opportunity meets preparedness. And I feel super lucky because I've had all of these amazing jobs and sort of life opportunities come my way. But it wasn't as though it was completely accidental, right? It wasn't also completely prescribed. It wasn't like I sat down as a teenager and kind of mapped out this journey that I've been on. I didn't have any clue how this would all turn out. But it wasn't also true that it was just a complete random walk. There were intentional things I did along the way that created opportunities for me. I got good at things that I was passionate about. By being good at that, that created opportunities for me to go do the next thing. And as you said, but between all of that aviation stuff I did, and then all of this really cool, interesting business stuff, between the management consulting, the stuff at Google, the stuff at Cisco Systems, this job that came my way, this opportunity was perfect for me. And I think I'm a good fit for it. I got the best mix of aviation and business. You need both of those to do this role. And had I not taken those prior steps, I obviously would not have been nearly as qualified a candidate for this. So you're exactly right. It's this perfect confluence of everything that's defined my life to this point.
Yeah. So for you guys listening, Darren loves flying so much. I was lucky enough to be a guest of his at AirVenture. So if anyone who is listening has been to that, you'll know it's the biggest, what is it, the biggest aviation event
In the world.
in the world.
Nope.
It's huge. How many people?
About 700,000 people over the course of the week.
In Wisconsin. It's crazy. I've never seen anything like it. I went up a couple years ago with my daughter was 5 at the time, and it turned into a core memory for her. She loved it so much. We went up and Darren has this golf cart that he drives around, and as soon as I got in the golf cart and he started driving, I was like, "You're a pilot. You're a pilot." I forgot about that. I was like, "You took off on that thing." I was like, "Oh my God, I can picture you like up in the sky just like it my daughter loved it. She's, like, in the golf cart eating ice cream. She still talks about you. She's like, "You're
That's great.
Aaron."
Well, now you get a sense of why I love it so much. And I'm lucky that I found something I love so much and have been able to make it such a core part of my life. But even in the book, as we know together, since we partnered so much for so much time to write that book, I'm not alone. There's a lot of people who've done that, who found that thing they like. They've turned it into a core part of their life. And they've either turned it into a living, the way they make money, or a central part of their life. Even if they don't make a living at it, they make a life out of it. And so that is a core part of the book, was really, what are the characteristics of people who've managed to build inspired and fulfilling lives? And I do think I use those two words really distinctly. I think they matter. I think the word inspired is, I wake up in the morning and I'm excited about the day ahead of me, right? I'm excited about the journey I'm on. And fulfilled is I wake up in the morning or maybe I go to bed at night and I look back at the journey I've been on and I feel like, wow, that's a meaningful journey. That's a life well lived. Like, even if the journey didn't continue tomorrow, I feel really good about the years behind me and the things I've done. And obviously, I think for all of us, we'd love to live a life that was both fulfilling but also inspired. I'm excited about the path ahead of me. And that's what's in the book, obviously, is trying to articulate the things people who live fulfilling and inspired lives, what is it about them that allow them to do that?
Yeah. It's so interesting too, because I feel like there's a really strong case for hobbies. And we don't always hear that, right? Like we hear like go to work out, like spend time with your family, all those things are important, but you don't hear a lot of people being like, you should go do that hobby.
Yeah, and you may remember one of the frameworks in the book was kind of how do you spend your 168 hours, right? That's in fact, it's a whole chapter on that. Is all of us have 168 hours in the week, 24 times 7, and way too often we're not very thoughtful about what that ideal week would look like, and we allow things like work in particular. Sometimes it's work ends up consuming most things. The stuff that goes away because of that are things like sleep or things like hobbies, sometimes things like family, with, I think, overall bad outcomes in life. And I believe that the best way to think about it is life is about choices, and you can't do everything, and you definitely can't do everything equally well. And so being thoughtful about what things you want to do well and what aspects of your 160 hours you want to protect, because they do make you a whole person. They give you a sustainable and, if you do it well, an inspired and fulfilling life. And so exactly to your point, I was really clear that aviation, no matter whether I did it for a living or didn't, it had to be a core part of how I spent every week. And sometimes a week or two would go by that I wouldn't, but I intentionally made time. And that required trade-offs, that required negotiation with Lisa, because I knew she felt the same way about horses. And so we supported each other in making sure that no matter how busy I was, and I might be gone 4 days out of every week, and I might be putting in 18-hour days sometimes, I could always find 4 to 6 hours a week where I could go out and do my airplane thing, because that was how I got my energy. It's something I did well. I enjoyed doing it. I was around a social network that I really valued, and really prioritizing not letting that go, not letting that be a victim of all the other things that could get in the way. And it sometimes meant that I had to, be okay that, hey, this PowerPoint slide is good enough. I could spend 2 more hours on that PowerPoint slide and make it perfect, let's call it. But, that's one's good enough for now. And there's not all slides or whatever your form of output is for your business. Not all things in there have to be equally good. And so being okay with that, I think, is an important part in order to free up time to do the other things that matter, equally important to you in your life.
I love that. Let's all stop being perfectionists. I think that's great advice. And then also just writing it down to know how you're actually spending your time. That's a big part of it, right? Is like, I think a lot of us um, think we spend a certain amount of time doing something, but if you go through and you have a chart in the book where you actually record your hours and you kind of just do an audit of the week, it turns out different than you thought. And then you can kind of just like readjust to make it match what you want it to be.
Yeah, and I found that that was a great exercise when I went and did that myself. Reality was most weeks didn't look like that perfect week, so it's not as though you have to be crazy maniacal about it. But it's helpful to know when it's not, when you're not living up to what you said was the ideal week, so you can start to make changes. Don't beat yourself up on any one week, but you can start to make changes that allow you to live a life that looks at least closer to it. And some weeks you might have that perfect week where it matches exactly, but it's a touchstone that allows you to continue to go back and recognize when you're off, so you can start in the moment making making nominal decisions that help you get something closer to what you've defined as ideal.
Hmm. Hmm. I think this is a concept that resonates with people of all ages, right? Because I know you're doing a lot of speaking now,
Yeah.
on book and other things, and you're passionate about talking to young people, especially, but you also talk to a lot of executives and older people. That seems to be something that resonates with a lot of people.
It does. That's what's kind of interesting is, on one hand, the book is, I'll say, most relevant for younger folks because they have so much time ahead of them to enact the kind of the principles that are in the book. But I've also found that I've run into people who've made complete life changes in their 40s and 50s, because you may still have 30 to 50 years ahead of you, and that's a lifetime, right, for most people. And so you start talking and telling the same principles, and man, the number of people I've had that are 40 and 50 years old that are, man, I landed in a place. I'm kind of in this inertia of life. I got a mortgage to pay. I've got kids. I'm paying for college. I've got all these habits that I've built up, but I'm really not living my best life. I kind of missed the thing I wanted to go do, or I never had the courage to step away from what I was doing to go to do the thing I really wanted to do. And there's a little bit of a feeling of kind of remorse and I'm trapped mindset. And the principles in the book are equally relevant for them. And there was, I talked about that quote that was really powerful for me many years ago. And I guess fortunately I heard it early enough in my life. And it was, when faced with a difficult decision, choose the one that makes for a better story. And I know the whole podcast is all about the power of stories. And boy, there's a lot of power in that saying, because we can always find reasons not to do something. Usually it's around either inertia or safety. It's a perceived safety. I have an opportunity to go do X. I'm currently doing Y. Doing X, almost by definition, if it's different from today, has some inherent level of risk to it. You don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. So most of us default to just keeping doing what we're doing because it is inherently less risky. And or you do the other thing, which is you look at the two options and you build this big spreadsheet, you weigh out the pros and cons, and if there's money involved, you lay out the spreadsheet of how much money will I make doing X versus Y, and you do all that stuff. And I've done that just like everybody does. But at the end of the day, it kind of depends on what you believe about it, on which option's better. And that saying has been helpful so many times when I was in consulting, I had a new job offer to go join Google. And I knew how to be successful in consulting. I didn't know what Google was be like. Google was actually less money to start with, at least. And that was, so I had all these trade-offs. And at the end of the day, I said, what would make for a better story? Spending X more years in my consulting life or going and doing 5 or 10 years at Google? And it was obvious, like, well, that would make for a cooler story. Well, that's the answer. Go do that. That's going to make for an interesting story. And then just absorb the uncertainty and deal with it. And it turned out to be great. Same thing when Cisco called. I was at Google. Google's a great company. I loved it. But what would make for a better story? Like going there and being part of the executive team and really helping to do cool and interesting things and learning new things and meeting new people. And so that helped me even earlier in my life too, leaving graduate school to go to Alaska and being a bush pilot. And all of those things really were driven by this idea that your life is really all about making interesting stories. And if you can do that and make a living while you're doing that, I mean, what's a more powerful way to live your life than that?
That has stuck with me. Probably that might be the stickiest part of that book for me is to
Yeah,
choose you deciding between two things to choose the option that makes for the better story. That has legit like changed my life.
I love it. I love it. Me too, right? I didn't create that saying. Someone said it to me many, many years ago, but boy, it sure stuck with me. And it's just really refreshing. You sit back and because all of us will be on our deathbed someday, hopefully further away than sooner. And what better thing than to both be looking backwards and feel fulfilled, like you led your best life, but also look at it and go, wow, look at all those stories, all those chapters, all of those, that richness you built into your life. I mean, what a satisfying feeling. And also to not feel as though you missed out because you didn't have the courage to step into what might have been a better story. And so by pushing yourself to, I got a hard decision, I'm going to choose the one that makes for a better story, that really does open up a lot of exciting paths in life that a lot of people let go past them without having the courage to take that step.
So many people do. It's hard because like I feel like you have had many jobs that most people would never leave. Like they would never leave that job. Like, oh, it's taking you so many interesting places, and now you're finally at this job that merges your two worlds. That's like this is like your perfect job, it seems like.
It is. It is. Yeah. And again, you can't plan it. There's no way I could have predicted this would have happened. And that's part of the excitement about it. And also it takes a lot of the stress away, I think, and you don't have to plan it. I didn't have to know this job was coming to take that last job. Like it wasn't like planting seeds. Like this is where I want to be. I'm going to do all these things in order to get that job. None of this was that, but it was definitely leaning into. I also want to do things where I'm getting better at what I'm doing, so that I have more options in front of me down the road. And the options that come to me ought to be around things that I enjoy. Like the last thing I want to do is become a great X if what I hate is X, right? Because you can become really good at almost anything if you put enough hours into it. But boy, what a shame if what you become great at is something you really don't enjoy doing. And I do see a lot of people end up there. Hey, my parents told me I should be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it is. And they end up going down that path and they end up making a perfectly fine living, but they don't really enjoy it. And so all of a sudden, it's kind of like the winner of the pie eating contest gets more pie, right? The winner of the being the best lawyer in the world gets more lawyering. That's awesome. If you love being a lawyer and you love legal stuff and you love the Constitution and all that, that's awesome. Like I don't want to disparage lawyers. I just know too many people that went down some version of that path and they've ended up creating a whole life around that they get trapped in because they're good at it and they make good money oftentimes. But it's what a shame because then they're every day they're getting up doing stuff they really don't want to be doing. And so to me, it's been more around following that North Star of what do I enjoy doing and how do I make as much of how I spend my time linked to that thing I enjoy doing. And the other part of that whole thing is who do I enjoy doing that with, right? A big part of life is around being around people and not everybody's equally interesting to work with. And so I have actively filtered opportunities towards the ones that put me in proximity to people I get inspired by. And so, the more you can do that, the more those people open doors for you and create opportunities and help you learn in ways that help you live a more fulfilling and inspired life. So I'm definitely very intentional about the people I surround myself with.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it kind of just speaks to the title we have here for the book, True North. I love this cover, by the way, if you're listening.
So do I. And I will give your team full credit. Your team, Amelia's team, did an amazing job of helping me figure out what's the best imagery for a book about living a inspired and fulfilling life. And so thank you for that.
It's very dreamy, like you're in a plane. I'm sure
Yeah.
you see this vision all the time because you've flown, what, 50 different types of airplanes or something.
Yeah, probably more at this point. You're exactly right.
Yeah. But so finding your true north, it's not what society thinks you should be doing. It's not what your parents think you should be doing or your friends. It's like the thing that actually lights you up. Maybe it makes you a little less money. Maybe it's scary, but chasing that thing and following it is how you live that inspired, fulfilled life.
Exactly. Yeah. And I in the book, as you know, I found people, it wasn't all about aviation. Of course, I come across people in aviation who've done that. So we have an astronaut in there, Jim Weatherby's in the book, and he's had more space shuttle flights than anybody in history. And, and so his story is in there for sure. But there's also stories of people who, the fellow who created Pitch Perfect, the movie Pitch Perfect, right? All about entertainment and acapella and how he did that, right? The things that he did to create that. And I thought one of his interesting stories back to this 168 hours is he was willing to get a less than great grade in French. And as he told me the story about it, it's like he had to take a language. So he took French when he was in college, but he realized that every minute spent getting from like a C to a B to an A was a minute that could be spent getting better at music. And in his case, modern day a cappella. And that was a conscious choice. He just said, I'm fine, because having a C or an A in French was going to make no difference in the world that he built and that he had envisioned, versus being a little bit better than anybody else at a cappella, unbeknownst to him at the time. But that's really what turned him into the guy in the world who ultimately was the creative director behind the movies, the two movies, Pitch Perfect, and among many other things he does with that world of modern day a cappella. So there's more than just aviation in the book, of course. It's lots of different ways of building a life around things that inspire you and leave you fulfilled.
Yeah. I think that's great advice for younger people too, because we are not good at everything. We're just not. And it takes
Yeah.
a lot of work and it can make people feel bad if you're like trying to bring up these things that are just never going to be strengths. And so leaning into the things that you are really good at, it makes a huge difference. And I know you've given that advice to your kids too, who are younger. Has that helped
Absolutely.
follow their ideal path so far?
It has, yeah. Our daughter's the youngest of the two. Our son's 26. He loves the mountains. He loves being outdoors, rock climbing, surfing, all of these things. And so, a big part of how he has spent his time, both growing up and now as an adult, is in that outdoor world. So he's now an EMT in an emergency room at a hospital on the West Coast. But his real passion is being in the mountains. So he picked a career path where he likes serving people and he likes the medicine, the medical world, but his real passion is in the mountains. So between November and kind of April of every year, he does avalanche control at a ski mountain outside of Seattle. And you do avalanche control from early morning till about 8 in the morning. And then you become ski patrol from 8 in the morning until, 4 in the afternoon type of thing. And he loves it. And so he's living his best life. He could certainly make more money doing other professions, but he's so fired up and so excited. And he's managed to create this symbiotic world where he's got a seasonal job, again, from like late November until April timeframe. Then he's back in the hospital the rest of the year. But even during that time, he structured that job where he can step away for a week or two at a time to go rock climbing, go river rafting, do whatever. And again, he's not making as much as he could, but he's off my payroll. He's paying his own bills. He's got his own place. He's living the life he wants to lead. And they're also kind of symbiotic, because the more work he does in the hospital, the greater the depth of experience he has in medical stuff. He imagines someday maybe he's either working for, maybe even owns a high-end backcountry ski company. And a big part of doing that is having all the medical capabilities that go along with the ski capability, because you got to be able to support your guests. And so it's not as though his day job, call it, during most of the year is completely irrelevant to being great at what he wants to do in the mountains. They actually do support each other. So yes, I'm loving him do that. And then my daughter's on her way to, she wants to be a vet or a vet tech. And so she's deep working with animals, and she grew up on a farm with animals. And so supporting that passion and her efforts to go off and make that a big part of her life.
I love that. That's such great advice. I'm trying to teach my daughter to follow her passions as well. So
Yeah, there's a lot of parents that kind of disparage that. They all this modern day thing, follow your passions. You got to make a living. You got to pay the bills, right? You can't just follow your passion. And I don't think those are inconsistent. If you're, I don't know, I'm trying to think about what a bad example would be, but because there may be certain passions where you just love something and your probability of making much money at it all is low. And I get it, right? You do have to ultimately pay your way through life. And so it may be then that passion is just, you just make sure of your 168 hours that you allocate enough of that 168 hours to doing that thing. So it keeps you fulfilled and energized so you can do the other thing. Although I think people too quickly default to, okay, I got to do the other thing in order to do my passion thing. And I would, I guess, challenge them to be really thoughtful and just look out into the world. Is there anybody who actually is making a meaningful part of their life out of that thing that you're really intrigued about or love doing? Because again, if you're really good at it, I mean, you can imagine the Pitch Perfect story when he tells his parents that he's excited about a cappella, right? Every parent like, oh my God, my son's going to starve to death, right? You got to go and do this, forget that. Instead he went and did it. He was good at it. He created something. You could just, I love the guy. He's just so interesting in how he's built his life. And you can just see the energy, and it's all around this thing he cares deeply about. And he basically created a world that didn't really exist, because even the stuff that happens in Pitch Perfect also happens in real life. These contests, these a cappella contests, and the show he created is what ended up coming out of the Pentatonics came out of that, right? So he was in part a big, way in which the Pentatonics got discovered. That's a cool example of someone where you could just see the parents going, uh-oh, our son's going to starve to death. And instead, because he was leaning into something he cared so deeply about, he created something that never existed before. So, I think it's a balance between being realistic about what you're doing and its ability to completely provide for your life, but not shutting that idea off so quickly that you don't even attempt it if you're concerned that you may not be able to make a life out of it. It might mean you may not get a 10,000 square foot house. You may not be able to buy that private jet that you'd love to have. I don't have a private jet, to be super clear. I've not done that. But, you may make compromises. And so you might not be as wealthy as you otherwise could be. But frankly, I'd rather be less wealthy and loving getting up every day and what I'm doing than having a lot of money in the bank and really not enjoying what I'm doing. Because I spend a lot of my time having the luxury of flying. I have flown lots of corporate jets and been around lots of very affluent people. And boy, I'll tell you, there's a lot of them that are not very happy with their life. And that's a big part of the genesis of what started the whole concept of the book, is how is it these people can be so wealthy and have so much, yet not be happy. And I would also encounter people who had far less and were far happier. And the book isn't about, hey, you can't be wealthy and happy. For sure you can. But it starts at the core of it. You're spending your time on things that matter to you and things that you are proud to be good at. It's around people that inspire you. That's the core. And sometimes you can do that and make a lot of money, but sometimes you won't make as much money. And that's okay. In my view, that's okay. You're building a life that you're inspired by and happy to live.
yeah, super, super interesting. And I feel so your job now with the AOPA, you're working with a lot of pilots, and for a lot of these members, this must be their passion too, right? Like flying. And so do you find yourself talking with more people who are sort of like living this inspired life and stepping into their passion and just making it a part of their everyday?
I do. Yeah, that's a part of what lights me up is there are a lot of people with passion in aviation. It is one of those things that's kind of an affliction. Once you discover, you go, wow, this is really cool. And you find other people who are equally inspired. But that being said, I come across a lot of people who do it as a hobby. And they really, in fact, there's a fellow I know really well out in Oregon that was a geologist for a living, and did flying for a hobby because he's always loved flying. And he finally, though, got to the point, probably at about 43 years old or so, where he really wasn't liking the geology thing and was really looking forward to every opportunity he had to do. He had to go out to the airport and fly. And he just made a choice one day. I am going to become a pilot for a living, not just and now that's what he's doing. He's flying these amazing jets all over the world. And that's been probably a 6 or 7 year journey. But he's doing great stuff. And so he feels as though he's really arrived. He's in the world he wants to live in. He's excited about it. And it's fun to see him because he really is enjoying this journey that he's on now and this chapter of his life, which is really much more aligned with the things that give him energy. And I've got lots of those stories. I come across lots of those people who've done that.
That's amazing. So you're telling us, even for those of us who are in our 40s, it's not too late. If you want to transition your career and be happier, you can still do it.
Now, and I know we won't, you've, I'm sure, shared your own story, but I know your story, and it's super cool going out of the office environment, discovering that, you're obviously a good writer and that you could actually help other people transition what has often been a dream of theirs to write a book. And it's hard to go from concept to actually having a physical book that you can share with other people. And I know you stepped into that because you discovered you like it and you're good at it. And it shows, right? You are really good at what you do. And I think you're a perfect example of the principles in the book.
Thanks. Yeah, I left corporate and that was like 13 years ago and I wanted to lean into what I loved. I didn't want all the politics. I just wanted to learn from interesting people, and that's been a great part of the job. I know you were saying like you want to work with people who inspire you, and part of owning your own business, I feel like you get to pick your clients and work with amazing people. And I feel like I've just almost have like a degree in all these little topics. Books has been
Yeah, it doesn't mean every day is perfect or that life doesn't have its challenges and all these things, right? So we all work through those, but it's definitely different to be working on a set of challenges or disappointments in a zone where you're at least showing up excited about sort of the environment that you put yourself in every day. And so, yeah, it's not like a Pollyannish view that as soon as you get this, life is perfect and you never have a problem. That's not what's behind it. But boy, it's exciting to navigate those problems from a place where you feel like you're doing what you should be doing.
yeah, totally. I know you mentioned one of the things you're doing a lot of now is speaking. And I think in the book, didn't we talk about how you used to be scared to speak in
Yeah.
places? Tell me about that evolution.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. There's two versions of it that they're linked together. One was I'm a, if for those who do Myers-Briggs, I'm an ISTJ, so I'm more of an I, more of an introvert. There's a question in Myers-Briggs about, you walk into a party, do you say, ta-da, I've arrived, or do you kind of stop the party and announce to everybody you're there, or do you kind of quietly walk in and see if you can find somebody because you're a little bit, shy about meeting strangers? And I was more the latter. I definitely was not somebody who would proactively engage in a conversation. And so when I found myself in consulting, I was generally the quiet one in the room. And I had this narrative, this story in my mind that, who am I to speak up? I'd be in a room with the CEO of a Fortune 50 company. I'd be surrounded by all these other incredibly smart people. My narrative in my mind was, I don't have nearly as much experience as anybody in this room. And so therefore, I should really be confident that what I'm about to say is brilliant. Otherwise, I should stay quiet. And of course, what that meant is I stayed quiet for the entire meeting. And so I was really shutting myself down by this narrative in my mind that was really not giving me the confidence to say something. And finally, a mentor of mine, pulled me aside and say, hey, look, when we're together and you're talking, you usually say pretty thoughtful things. But I notice in these meetings, you almost never speak up what's going on. And I shared that sort of insecurity. And his point was, well, he goes, why don't we just create an analogy in your mind? He said, which of the two scenarios is more comfortable for you? There's 2 seconds left in the basketball game. You're down by 2 points. Your team's down by 2 points. They want to throw the ball to you. You got to dribble down the court and do a 3-point shot from, somewhere outside of the gate there to win the game with your 3-point shot. And some people want that. Or the alternative is it's the beginning of the game. Everyone's just getting warmed up. They want to throw the ball to you, dribble down and do a layup for 2 points. Which of those is the one you want? And I was like, second one all day long. I do not want to be that guy where all eyes are on me, pressure's on me to win the game. And he's like, cool. He says, then your job is to get those 2 points on the board at the beginning of the game. That's what you do. When you get into a meeting, you are one of the first ones to speak. You're going to say, how was your weekend? Or you're going to say, I can't believe it's going to be, 95 degrees tomorrow. Things that are layups. These are like, you can't be wrong. Nobody can criticize you for them. Or if it's part of a natural conversation, you're going to offer the first perspective. When somebody asks a question, you offer the first perspective, and then you're on the board. Because once you're on the board, you're in the game. Once you're in the game, it doesn't matter as much how many more layups you make. And by the way, once you're on the board and in the game, your probability of making more of those goes way up. Because what happens is if you're not in the game and all of a sudden 15 minutes has gone by, 30 minutes has gone by, the pressure really, at least in your mind, goes way up. That whatever you say now better look a lot like a 3-point shot. And so I took that to heart and really just started getting in the game in very low pressure environment. And so that's the same thing then with public speaking, which is, it is super nerve-wracking. You're getting up in front of people and you're putting yourself out there and you're convinced you're going to say the wrong stuff or flub up your lines and look like an idiot in front of all those people. And so I started finding ways to have layups, basically make it as simple as possible. Be on a panel. I'm not the only one up there. There's 4 of us. Ask me the first question, so I'm not at risk of having to come up with something that 3 other people have already said. I would orchestrate it to reduce the pressure. And then the more I did it, the more comfortable I got. The more I did it, the more I realized I didn't have to say exactly the right thing because nobody knows what I'm supposed to say. So I just got to say a general framework. And whatever I say, nobody's going to know whether it was right or wrong. And so I started finding ways to, again, in my own mind, reduce the pressure and the stress so that I could perform better. And ultimately, now I do it. Now I look forward to it. I still get nervous, but it's an exciting nervous. It's an energy like, this is cool. I get to go out and do this in front of all these people and share a perspective that I care about. And so it's not like I don't have butterflies, but they're, I've transitioned those butterflies into being energizers that help me hopefully perform better once I'm on stage.
That's such good advice, because if you're trying to connect with audiences, being nervous it doesn't help if you're to the point where like you can't even think straight, right? So yeah.
Yeah. The only other tip I would give in case somebody who's listening is finds himself in this position. I realize there's 2 points in a presentation that matter. Everything else doesn't, for the most part. And one is the opening. And so I want to make sure I start strong. And so to the extent I memorize anything, it's what are like the first 5 words I'm going to say. And that's not too hard. I can't memorize a whole paragraph, but I can memorize the first 5 words when I walk out there. Because if I walk out and the first few things I say, I stumble over and I get wrong and I mess up, then all of a sudden, the panic comes in and you're like, uh-oh. And then the rest of your talk is you're always recovering. So I said, okay, get really clear on how I'm going to start. And then how am I going to end? How am I going to wrap all this up? Whatever I've said in the middle, the sandwich, how am I going to end so that it ends strong? So almost no matter what I said, it's going to be a powerful ending. If I can memorize those 2 things and try to do that as well as I can, everything else is kind of the sandwich. It's the meat in the middle, but that's not what they're going to remember as much. And then the last point on that is I don't script everything. I might write out what I want to say, but I don't worry about it being a script like I'm in a movie. I have ideally three themes. I want to set this bucket, this bucket, this bucket. Every story has an arc to it, beginning, middle, end. I memorize those 3 buckets. I don't forget those 3 buckets. Everything else in there is kind of at a theme level or bullet level. And however I say it, if I miss something that was in a bucket because oops, I forgot, no big deal. Nobody knows I missed it, but I still have the arc of this story. And so I've done those kind of, I don't know, techniques for me that work that allow me to have hopefully a coherent conversation that starts strong, ends strong, enough substance and structure in the middle to be hopefully good, but never worrying about it being perfect. Every time I walk off, I go, oh, I should have said that differently, or I missed saying that. Who cares? Nobody else knows that you missed that or didn't say it the way you wanted to. Move on and go do the next one. So I've come to really enjoy it because of that, without having to be perfect.
That's great, because I feel like so many people just like overanalyze the performance after, and they're like, oh, this or that. And like you hear your recording back and it's cringy, right? And so you just
Yep.
keep it moving. Done is better.
Yep. Move on. Move on. Exactly. And your reality is like everything in life. You get better the more you do it, right? Because you've got a daughter, and wasn't like they took their first step and fell down like you're never going to master this walking thing. You say, no, let's try it again. Let's try it again. Let's try it again. And pretty soon they know how to walk. And then pretty soon they know how to talk and all these things. So it's the same thing. And so, if you can give yourself lower stress environments to practice those things. You don't go to if you're trying to learn how to play football, you don't try to out in the Super Bowl, right? You start out on the sidelines and you play with small things where the pressures are lower. And it's the same thing for public speaking. Try to give yourself opportunities to speak at a local school about something. And the more you do it, the better you get. And then also the key is being open to feedback, right? Because all of us can get better at what we do. And so I try to have as much of my stuff recorded as I can. And then I'll look at it myself too. And it's usually cringy. To your point, none of us like looking at ourselves. But more importantly, I'll give it to someone else and say, what would you suggest to me? How could I make this even better? How could this be even better? And even when you start having people compliment you on your speech, it's like, yeah, I get it, but I'd like to be better, right? That's awesome. Thank you for the compliment. I like that and that, but I want to be even better. And so I'll share that with people and say, what would you do? And I had one woman recently that she came up, she said, I loved your talk. That was so good. That was amazing. And she says, but would you mind if I gave you, some critical feedback? And I was like, no, absolutely. I love getting feedback. I want to be better. And she says, I wish you would have paused more often so that we could clap. And I was like, that's kind of cool. I get it. And she's right. Like I get going. I can talk a lot, obviously. I get going. I'm like, but that kind of robs the power of the message, because there were a bunch of messages in that particular talk, and I could have paused and allowed the audience to sort of respond and give me feedback on how it's going. And so that was super helpful. It's like, all right, that's great. Now I need some coaching on when do I do those pauses so I get the maximum impact of the message I'm delivering. And so, I'm always trying to get better.
That's cute. I can picture that happening.
Yep.
I get that though. It's like you kind of do need to pause. And sometimes if people start clapping and you're still talking and then they can't hear you and it's this whole thing. So yeah.
Yep, exactly right. So it was helpful, actually. I'm glad you took the time to come up and share, constructive feedback.
Very cool. Well, I think you've become a master storyteller. And so you've come a long way from your days when you didn't want to say anything in a meeting at all to totally running it. So I have one last question for you. But before I ask it, I want to point people to your website. So DarrenPleasance.com, PLEASANCE.com. And my last question is, what's your best advice for telling stories that stick with people?
I think, definitely authenticity matters, right? So I think finding stories about your life or that you can at least connect with personally will resonate a lot more than just some random story. And so I think there's an authenticity part where you can really convey both the story itself, but also, why that story has meaning to you. I think that matters a lot. I think people just telling other people's stories, it's just not nearly as impactful as your own. And all of us have stories. And so I think it's around how do you capture those and tell those in a way where you got some learning from them in a way that, ultimately improved your own life.
Yeah. Excellent advice. Well, thank you. So today we've been talking with Darren Pleasance, author, executive, speaker, and aviation enthusiast. Darren, where can people learn more about you and stay connected?
Good news with this thing they call Google. You can Google me and you'll find a lot of stuff about me out there. Obviously, the book, I think there's a foreword in the book that talks about why I wrote the book. And in that, it talks a lot about my own journey. But there's lots of content out there that I've either published or spoken about. And so I think people can go there. And as you said, my website, DarrenPleasance.com, has all of this in there as well. And I love to hear from people. So if people want to reach out, I try to be as responsive as I can. And so they can find me at my current company, AOPA. So Darren.Pleasance@AOPA.org. You can reach me out here. You can find me through Facebook and Instagram and all these other places out there. So I guess I shouldn't be too hard to find. There's enough about me out there. If someone wants to connect, I'm happy to do that.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Amelia, thank you. And not just for today. Thank you for that, all the help in the book. It was really just, I'll leave it at this because I'm sure there's a listener who is imagining someday maybe writing their own book. I sat on that book concept for well over a decade and I made small progress and continued to think about it. But it really wasn't until I found you, which I found you through Facebook and through a mutual friend. And we teamed up, and it took me from concept for 10 years to an actual book in the market in less than 1 year. From that point we chose to get going to the book being in the market was less than 1 year. So huge thanks to you and to Pithy Wordsmithery for doing that.
Thank you so much. I loved working on the book. I love taking like a tangle of ideas and just figuring out what the narrative is and how to put it together and have it be a book that people will love to read. And your success is my success. And so I've seen it like get so popular and I'm just like cheering you on. So
awesome. Thank you, Amelia.
Right, thanks. Thanks for listening to Sticky Stories That Stick. We'll see you again next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.